Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The shop I worked at had this cozy feel to it, with tall shelves packed with back issues and new releases displayed prominently near the front. We had a pretty solid group of regulars who came in every Wednesday for New Comic Book Day, and over time I got to know most of them pretty well. There was the elderly man who only collected vintage Superman issues, the teenage girl who was obsessed with anything related to the X-Men, and the middle-aged woman who had every single issue of Wonder Woman ever published. Then there was this one guy who I'll call the regular customer. He was probably in his 30s, worked some office job downtown, and came in religiously every Wednesday around lunchtime. He seemed friendly enough at first, and we'd chat about different comic storylines and upcoming releases. He mentioned once that he was really into science fiction shows, particularly Stargate, which I thought was cool since I'd watched some of it years ago. One Wednesday, he came in like usual, and we started talking while I rang up his weekly purchases. I mentioned that I'd just started rewatching Stargate from the very beginning on streaming. I was pretty excited about it because I'd only seen the first 7 seasons when it originally aired, and I'd never gotten around to watching the final 3 seasons or any of the spin-off shows. The regular customer immediately asked if I knew about how Daniel Jackson dies and then comes back as an ascended being in season 6. I was shocked and told him not to spoil anything for me because I wanted to experience it fresh. He apologized and said he just assumed I'd seen it all since I mentioned liking the show. The next Wednesday, he came in again and we started chatting about comics. Then out of nowhere, he brought up Stargate again. He asked if I'd gotten to the part where they introduced the Ori as the new main villains yet. I was frustrated and told him again not to spoil things for me, explaining that I was only halfway through season 3. He gave me another apology and said he'd try to remember next time, but there was this little smirk on his face that made me wonder if he was really sorry at all. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and tried to change the subject back to comics. The following week, it happened again. And the week after that, every single Wednesday, without fail, he would find a way to slip in another Stargate spoiler. He'd tell me about major character deaths, plot twists, relationship developments, and season finales. Each time I'd ask him to stop, and each time he'd give me that same fake apology with that annoying little smirk. I got serious with him one week and told him he really needed to stop telling me spoilers because it was ruining the show for me. He brushed it off and said he was just excited to talk about it with someone, promising he'd try to be more careful. But he never was more careful. If anything, he seemed to get more deliberate about it. He'd wait until I was in the middle of helping another customer, then drop a massive spoiler just loud enough for me to hear. Or he'd phrase it like a question, asking if I'd gotten to a specific plot point yet, which basically told me exactly what was going to happen. This went on for about 2 months. 2 months of weekly spoilers despite my repeated requests for him to stop. I started dreading Wednesdays because I knew he'd find some new way to ruin the show for me. The worst part was that smirk he'd get every time I asked him to stop. It was clear he was enjoying this little power trip he had over me. I was getting frustrated, but I couldn't exactly ban a regular customer for talking about TV shows. My manager would have thought I was crazy, so I had to find another way to deal with this situation. The thing is, working at a comic shop means you read a lot of comics. And I mean a lot. Back then, I was reading pretty much every new issue that Marvel and DC published each week, plus a bunch of independent titles. It was part of my job to know what was happening in all the major storylines so I could make recommendations to customers. I probably read more comics in a month than most people read in a year. So when the regular customer came in the following Wednesday with his usual stack of pre-ordered comics, I was ready for him. He made his purchase like always, and I could see him gearing up to drop another Stargate spoiler on me. But before he could say anything, I did something different. Instead of putting his comics in a bag like I normally would, I spread them all out on the counter in front of him. He looked confused for a second, probably wondering why I wasn't bagging them up. I told him that I'd actually read all of these already. I pointed to the first comic in his stack and explained that the main character's love interest dies on page 15, describing it as a pretty brutal death. His face started to change when he realized what was happening. I moved to the next comic and told him that the big villain everyone had been building up to for months gets defeated by a character who was introduced just 2 issues ago. I mentioned how anticlimactic it really was. He asked what I was doing, clearly getting upset. I told him I was just excited to talk about comics with someone and that there was more to share. I continued pointing to each comic, spoiling major plot points, character deaths, surprise reveals, and cliffhanger endings. I told him about the shocking twist in his favorite ongoing series, the identity of the mysterious new hero in another book, and the outcome of the big crossover event he'd been looking forward to. His face went from confused to annoyed to genuinely upset when I systematically ruined every single comic he'd just bought. The smirk was completely gone now, replaced by a look of horrified realization. He finally spoke up and told me to stop because I was ruining all of them. I asked if I was really doing that, giving him a fake apology and explaining that I just thought he'd appreciate knowing what happens. I pointed out that he seemed to enjoy sharing spoilers so much, so I figured he'd want the same treatment. I finished going through his entire stack, making sure to hit every major plot point and surprise ending. By the time I was done, his face was flushed with anger and frustration. I cheerfully told him that now he knew everything that happened in his comics and asked if that wasn't great. I finally bagged up his comics and handed them to him. He grabbed them without a word and stormed out of the shop. I could see other customers trying not to laugh at what had just happened. The next Wednesday, he came in for his usual visit. But this time, when we started talking, he didn't mention Stargate at all. In fact, he seemed to go out of his way to avoid bringing up any TV shows or movies. He just bought his comics and left without trying to spoil anything for me. It's been 6 months since then, and he's never mentioned Stargate again. He still comes in every Wednesday, but now our conversation sticks strictly to comics and the weather. And you know what? I finally got to finish watching Stargate without having every major plot point ruined for me. I've been with my girlfriend for a couple of years now, and she is honestly the hardest working person I know. She works at an animal rehabilitation center, which sounds peaceful until you realize she's dealing with injured wildlife that can bite, scratch, or worse. The pay isn't great, but she loves helping animals recover and get back to their natural habitats. The problem was her co-worker. This woman was the absolute worst. While my girlfriend would be cleaning enclosures, preparing food, administering medications, and handling the more dangerous animals, her co-worker would find every excuse to avoid the hard work. She'd suddenly need bathroom breaks when it was time to clean the large predator enclosures. She claimed she had a headache when they needed to restrain an injured hawk for treatment. She'd disappear entirely when shipments of food arrived and needed to be processed and stored. My girlfriend would come home exhausted, not just from the physical work, but from picking up the slack. She'd tell me about her day and I could see the frustration building. She'd complain about having to handle all the eagle feedings alone because her co-worker claimed she was afraid of getting too close to the enclosure. I'd point out that they both went through the same training program, and she'd agree that her co-worker just didn't want to do anything that required effort. This went on for months. My girlfriend would cover for her during the most difficult tasks, work longer hours, and deal with the stress of knowing she couldn't rely on her partner. The worst part was that their supervisor rarely worked weekends, so most of these incidents happened when no one was watching. Then everything changed when her co-worker got engaged. She walked into work one Monday morning with this huge grin and immediately started waving her hand around. The ring wasn't anything spectacular, just a simple gold band with what looked like a 1-carat diamond, but you'd think she'd won the lottery based on her reaction. Her co-worker announced that her boyfriend had proposed over the weekend and excitedly showed off the ring to everyone. My girlfriend politely congratulated her and said it was beautiful. Her co-worker gushed about how it was a full carat and the gold was 14 carat, explaining that her fiancé had saved up for months to get her something this nice. That should have been the end of it. A simple congratulations and back to work. But no. This woman turned her engagement ring into a full-time job. She'd bring it up with every visitor, every volunteer, every delivery person who came to the facility. During their lunch breaks, instead of eating, she'd spend the entire time talking about wedding plans and showing off her ring. She'd hold her hand up to the light, twist it around, and point out every detail to anyone within earshot. She'd constantly comment on how the diamond caught the light from different angles and how clear it was. My girlfriend would just nod politely and try to eat her sandwich in peace, but there was no escape. Even worse, the constant chatter about the ring somehow made her even lazier at work. She claimed she couldn't do certain tasks because she might damage her ring. When asked to clean the monkey enclosure, she'd refuse because one of them might grab her hand and she couldn't risk anything happening to her ring. My girlfriend would suggest she just take it off for an hour, but her coworker would absolutely refuse, saying she wasn't risking losing it. So my girlfriend ended up doing even more work while listening to non-stop ring commentary. She'd come home completely drained, and I could see the situation was affecting her mental health. I've been planning to propose anyway. We'd been together for 3 years, we'd moved in together, and I knew she was the one. I just hadn't picked out a ring yet because I wanted it to be perfect. Her coworker's constant bragging actually gave me all the information I needed. I started paying attention during work events and parties. Her coworker would corner anyone who'd listen and give them a complete rundown of her ring's specifications. She was so proud of every detail that she'd basically created a technical manual. She'd brag about how it was 14-karat gold, 1 carat, and had really good clarity. She'd mentioned that her fiancé said the jeweler told him it was an excellent cut. I took notes. Not literally, but I remembered everything. Then I went to several jewelry stores and did my research. If she wanted to make this a competition, I'd make sure my girlfriend won. I upgraded everything. Where her coworker had 14-karat gold, I chose platinum. More durable, more expensive, and it wouldn't tarnish. Her 1-carat diamond became my 1.7-carat diamond. I researched color and clarity grades and chose the highest quality I could afford. For the cut, I selected one specifically designed to maximize sparkle and light reflection. The whole process took about 2 months. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect, not just because I was trying to outdo her coworker, but because my girlfriend deserved the best ring I could possibly give her. I planned a weekend trip to the mountains, somewhere peaceful where we could be alone. On Saturday evening, when we were watching the sunset, I got down on one knee. I told her that I've been thinking about this for months and that she was the most amazing person I knew. I explained that I couldn't imagine my life without her and asked if she would marry me. She started crying and said yes, of course she would. She was amazed by how perfectly the ring fit and kept staring at how it sparkled in the fading sunlight. The real test came on Monday when she returned to work. She'd decided to announce the engagement in the break room during lunch when most of the staff would be there. She told everyone that we'd gotten engaged over the weekend and showed off her ring. The room erupted in congratulations and excitement. Everyone wanted to see the ring, and when she held up her hand, I could see the difference immediately. Her ring absolutely outshone her co-workers in every possible way. People were amazed by how gorgeous it was and commented on how it sparkled. Someone asked if it was platinum because it looked so elegant. One of the volunteers said they'd never seen a diamond catch the light like that. Her co-worker stood in the corner watching the whole scene. Her face went from fake smile to obvious shock to pure anger in about 30 seconds. She looked down at her own ring, then back at my girlfriend's, then walked out of the room. My girlfriend asked if she'd said something wrong, and one of the other co-workers told her not to worry about it, that she was probably just having a bad day. But I knew exactly what happened. Her co-worker had spent months being the center of attention with her ring, and now she'd been completely upstaged. Through the window, I could see her in the hallway, actually crying. Her co-worker never mentioned her ring again. Not once. The woman who'd spent months showing it off to everyone suddenly acted like it didn't exist. Whenever she saw my girlfriend's ring, she'd visibly scowl and find an excuse to leave the room. My girlfriend would wonder if her co-worker was upset about something, saying she couldn't figure out what she'd done wrong. I'd suggest maybe she was just stressed about wedding planning. I couldn't tell her the truth at the time, but I was enjoying every second of it. Her co-worker had made my girlfriend's life miserable for months, and now she was getting a taste of her own medicine. A few weeks later, my girlfriend put in her notice. She'd found a better job at a veterinary clinic with better pay and more professional co-workers. On her last day, her co-worker barely said goodbye. Months later, when we were planning our own wedding, I finally told my girlfriend the real reason I'd gone overboard with her ring. She shook her head and said it was terrible, but she was laughing when she said it. She admitted that she'd suspected something was up when her co-worker's whole personality changed overnight. She said she should probably feel bad about it, but honestly, after everything her co-worker had put her through, it felt kinda good to see her reaction. I agreed that after making her life hell for months, a little ring envy was the least she deserved. We've been married for 2 years now, and my wife still loves her ring. Her old co-worker probably moved on to making someone else's life miserable, but at least it isn't my wife's problem anymore. My life has been pretty normal for the most part. I'm 45, married to my husband for 20 years, and we live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. We both work decent jobs and have managed to save up over the years. My husband is a veteran who served 2 tours overseas, and I work as a nurse at the local hospital. The trouble started with my sister's daughter. Let me give you some background here. My sister has always been the type to spoil her kids rotten. She never said no to anything, never made them work for what they wanted, and always bailed them out of trouble. Her daughter, who I'll call Karen because that's exactly what she turned into, grew up thinking the world owed her everything. Karen is 22 now and has been nothing but problems since she turned 18. She's been arrested twice for shoplifting, got kicked out of college for cheating, and has been jumping from one dead-end job to another. But my sister keeps making excuses for her and even had the nerve to ask me and my husband to help Karen get back on her feet multiple times. About 6 months ago, Karen came to our house crying about how she needed money for rent. My husband and I felt bad for her, so we lent her $800. She promised to pay us back within 2 months. Of course, she never did. When we asked about it, she got defensive and told us we were being greedy because we had more money than her. That should have been our first red flag. Then there was the incident at my mother's funeral 3 months ago. Karen showed up wearing a designer dress and expensive jewelry while complaining about being broke. When I asked her about it, she said she deserved nice things too and accused me of being judgmental. The whole family was embarrassed by her behavior, but my sister still defended her. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. Karen had been asking about my jewelry collection for months. I have some nice pieces that my husband has given me over the years for anniversaries and birthdays, plus a few family heirlooms from my grandmother. Karen kept making comments about how I never wear them and how it was wasteful to keep them locked away. Here's where it gets crazy. Last Tuesday, I was homesick with the flu. My husband had taken the day off to take care of me. We were both upstairs around 2 p.m. when we heard glass breaking downstairs. At first, we thought maybe our cat had knocked something over, but then we heard voices. My husband grabbed his gun from the safe. He's licensed to carry, and we've had the gun for home protection for years. We crept downstairs and saw Karen in our living room with some guy I'd never seen before. They had broken the glass on our back door to get in, and Karen was leading him straight to our bedroom where she knew we kept the jewelry. My husband demanded to know what they were doing in our house. Karen spun around and had the audacity to look annoyed instead of ashamed. She told us she thought we were both at work and acted like this was our fault for being home. I asked her why she had broken into our house. Karen claimed she didn't break in because she was family. She said she just needed to borrow some of my jewelry for a job interview. The guy with her looked nervous and kept looking at the broken door. My husband pointed out that she had broken our door and brought a stranger into our house to steal from us. Karen insisted it wasn't stealing if she was going to bring it back. She complained that we never wear the jewelry anyway, so what was the big deal? I told Karen this was insane and that she can't just break into people's houses and take their things. Karen argued that we have so much money and nice things, and she just wanted to borrow one necklace. She accused us of being dramatic about the whole situation. That's when her friends started getting antsy and suggested they should just leave. But Karen refused and said they came here for a reason. She claimed we owed her anyway for all the times we never helped her when she really needed it. My husband told them both to get out of our house right now, or he was calling the police. Karen said we wouldn't call the cops on our own knees because her mom would never forgive us. I told her to watch me and pulled out my phone to dial 911. That's when Karen's friend panicked and made a move toward the jewelry box on our dresser that Karen had already opened. My husband warned him to stop, but the guy kept going. My husband fired one shot into the guy's leg. He went down screaming and Karen started freaking out. Karen yelled that he had actually shot her friend and that this was insane. I told her they broke into our house and tried to steal from us. So what did she expect? Karen kept screaming that she was my niece and family and that we couldn't treat her like this. The police arrived about 5 minutes later. Karen immediately started crying and playing the victim. She told the officers to please help her because her aunt and uncle were crazy and shot her friend over a misunderstanding. The officer asked what kind of misunderstanding this was. Karen claimed she just came over to visit and my uncle started waving a gun around for no reason. I told them that wasn't what happened at all and that they had broken in through our back door. The officers looked at the broken glass and the pry marks on the door. They also found the jewelry box open and several pieces scattered on the floor where Karen had been going through them. The officer told Karen she was under arrest for breaking and entering and attempted theft. Karen said this was ridiculous and kept insisting she was family. She begged me to tell them she was family. I explained that being family doesn't give her the right to break into our house and steal from us. Karen protested that she wasn't stealing, she was borrowing, and there was a difference. The officer explained that breaking into someone's house to take their property without permission is theft, regardless of her relationship to the homeowner. When they put the handcuffs on Karen, she kept begging me to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. She pleaded with me not to let them arrest her because she would lose her job. She promised to pay us back for the door. I told her she should have thought about that before she broke into our house. Karen apologized and said she made a mistake begging me not to press charges. My husband told her she wasn't sorry she did it, she was sorry she got caught. The paramedics took her friend to the hospital and the police took Karen to jail. My sister called me that night screaming about how I'd ruined Karen's life. She said I was heartless for pressing charges and that Karen was just going through a rough patch. I told my sister that Karen is an adult who made adult choices and now has to face adult results. My sister hasn't spoken to me since, but honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm tired of enabling Karen's behavior and making excuses for her. Karen's friend decided to testify against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. Turns out this wasn't their first time doing this together. They've been breaking into houses for months, and Karen had been using her knowledge of family and friends to target homes she knew would have valuable items. Karen ended up getting 18 months in prison and has to pay restitution for our door and medical bills for her friend. My sister is still convinced we're the bad guys in this situation, but Karen finally got the reality check she needed. I've been living with my parents for the past 2 years, trying to save up money after my previous roommate situation went completely sideways. My old roommate decided to stop paying rent without telling me, so I got stuck with the full amount for 3 months before I could get out of that lease. It wiped out my savings completely. Moving back in with my parents at 26 wasn't exactly my life plan, but I needed to get back on my feet financially. I've been working extra hours, picking up weekend shifts, and basically living like a hermit to save every penny for a security deposit on a decent apartment. The housing market here is brutal, and most places want first month, last month, and security deposit up front. I finally found a place that's perfect, close to work, good neighborhood, and the landlord actually responded to my application. So last Monday, I'm checking my bank account during lunch, and boom, my tax refund finally hit. $3,000. I literally did a little happy dance at my desk because this was it. This was my ticket out of my childhood bedroom and into actual adult independence again. I immediately called the landlord and scheduled a meeting to put down the deposit. My desk neighbor, let's call her Karen, apparently saw me on the phone and overheard me mention the deposit amount. Within an hour, half the office knew I got a big tax refund. I have no idea how office gossip travels so fast, but suddenly, everyone's congratulating me on my windfall. Karen walks up to my desk around 3 o'clock with this weird smile on her face. She told me she heard about my tax refund and said it was so exciting. I thanked her and mentioned I was relieved because I could finally move out of my parents' place. Then she said she wanted to ask me something. She explained she was going to Cancun next month with her sister and was just a little short on spending money. She asked if I could spot her like $500, saying I just got all that money back from taxes anyway. I literally stared at her for a full 5 seconds. The sheer nerve of this woman. I asked her what she meant, wanting to know if she really wanted me to lend her money for a vacation. She said yes, explaining that I just got $3,000 and $500 would be like nothing to me right now. I told her that's not how tax refunds work. I explained that it was my money that the government was holding all year and it was already spoken for because I needed every penny for my apartment deposit. She kept pushing, telling me not to be like that and promising she'd pay me back after her next paycheck. I said no again, telling her I wasn't lending her money for a vacation. That's when her whole demeanor changed. Her face got all twisted up and she crossed her arms. She said she really thought we were friends and guessed she was wrong about me. I told her this had nothing to do with friendship and that I needed this money for housing. She just said whatever and that she could see how it was, then stomped back to her desk. The next day I started noticing people giving me weird looks. During the morning coffee break, I overheard 2 people from accounting talking about how I was being greedy with my windfall and not helping out a friend in need. It became clear that Karen had been going around telling everyone her version of the story. By Wednesday, it had gotten so bad that even my supervisor pulled me aside. He said he'd been hearing some chatter about personal financial stuff and asked if everything was okay. I explained that Karen had asked me to lend her money for a vacation, and I said no, so now she was telling everyone I was being selfish. My supervisor asked if she really wanted money for a vacation, so I told him about the $500 for Cancun and how when I said I needed my tax refund for my apartment deposit, she said I was being a bad friend. My supervisor just shook his head and said that was completely inappropriate. He explained that you don't ask co-workers for money, especially for non-emergencies. Thursday morning, Karen cornered me in the break room. She said she hoped I was happy because now everyone thought she was some kind of money-grubbing person. I told her she literally asked me for $500 for a vacation and then told everyone I was greedy when I said no. She argued that it wasn't like I needed all that money right now since I was living with my parents rent-free. I told her that wasn't her business, and I was moving out precisely because I saved up for a deposit. She said I was being ridiculous and that friends help each other out. I replied that friends don't guilt-trip each other into funding their vacations. That's when she really lost it. She said fine and told me not to come crying to her when I needed something someday. I simply said I wouldn't. Friday afternoon, our HR director sent out an email to the whole office about maintaining professional boundaries and inappropriate financial requests between colleagues. Apparently, my supervisor had reported the situation to HR after Karen continued spreading rumors about me. Monday morning, Karen gets called into HR. She comes back to her desk looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Turns out asking co-workers for money for personal expenses is against company policy, and spreading rumors about colleagues refusing such requests is considered creating a hostile work environment. Wednesday, Karen's sister calls the office looking for her. When Karen takes the call, she starts yelling about how she can't afford the Cancun trip anymore and needs to cancel. The whole office heard her having a meltdown about losing her deposit. She screamed at her sister that she couldn't believe she was bailing on her now, especially since she'd already told everyone at work she was going. Turns out Karen had been telling people she was definitely going to Cancun, and had been bragging about her upcoming vacation. Now she looked like a complete fool. That same day, I got the keys to my new apartment. I brought in donuts for everyone to celebrate finally moving out on my own. Karen sat at her desk in complete silence, while everyone congratulated me on my new place. She hasn't spoken to me since, which honestly has made work so much more peaceful. I heard she's been telling people the whole thing was a misunderstanding, but nobody's buying it. My husband and I have been married for 8 years, and we host family gatherings. We have 3 dogs, 2 we've had for years, and 1 we recently took in when his elderly owner passed away. The newest addition, let's call him our rescue dog, is a sweet older guy, but he's got some quirks. He's very sensitive to noise and crowds, so when we have guests over, he usually retreats upstairs to our bedroom where it's quiet and he can relax on our bed. The thing about our rescue dog is that he's only ever eaten dry kibble his whole life. His previous owner was very strict about his diet, and for good reason. Any change in his food, even small treats or scraps, completely upsets his stomach. When I say upset, I mean he gets explosive diarrhea that's impossible to clean out of his long, fluffy fur. It's a nightmare scenario that we learned about the hard way during his first week with us. This past weekend, we planned a big family buffet. My 3 brothers were coming over with their wives and all their kids, ranging from teenagers to young adults. We'd had problems before with family members sneaking food to our dogs, despite our requests not to, so I was determined to be crystal clear this time. When everyone started arriving and bringing in their dishes, I made sure to announce loudly to the whole group that they shouldn't feed our rescue dog any treats or human food. I warned them that anyone caught doing it would be the one upstairs shampooing the poop out of his fur. My sister-in-law laughed and rolled her eyes, telling me I was being unnecessarily graphic and that it was just a dog. I explained that people hadn't listened in the past and I wasn't playing around this time because he was way more sensitive than our other 2 dogs. I thought I'd made myself clear, but apparently not clear enough. The party was going well for the first couple hours. Everyone was eating, chatting, and having a good time. Our rescue dog had done his usual thing and gone upstairs to our bedroom to avoid the crowd. Then my husband came downstairs looking annoyed. My husband told me he'd found a piece of sausage roll on the floor upstairs. The room went quiet. I felt my stomach drop. I asked who had given him food, and my nephew, who's 19 and should definitely know better, sheepishly raised his hand. He admitted he was just trying to make friends with the dog and had given him a little bit of sausage roll. He said he didn't think it would be a big deal. My husband and I exchanged looks. We were both furious, but the rest of the family was acting like it was no big deal. People were laughing it off and saying things like, he meant well, and that boys will be boys. I went upstairs to check on our rescue dog, and that's when I realized the full extent of the problem. When everyone had arrived, they'd all put their coats on our bed like they always did. I'd never thought to tell them not to because it had never been an issue before. But now our rescue dog, who was clearly feeling sick and didn't want to come downstairs with all the people, had an accident right there on the bed. Most of it was contained to the comforter, but some had gotten on my nephew's leather jacket. Our poor dog had never had an accident in the house before, and I could tell he was embarrassed and uncomfortable. I called my husband upstairs, and we immediately took our rescue dog to the shower to get him cleaned up. The poor thing was shaking and clearly felt terrible. When we were dealing with this, people started coming upstairs to see what was happening. When my nephew saw his jacket, he completely lost it. He started yelling that it was disgusting and accused me of making the dog do this on purpose to prove a point. His voice was getting louder. My husband and I were trying to clean the jacket with antibacterial wipes, and honestly, it looked fine. There was no smell, no visible marks on the leather, though obviously it would need a proper cleaning for hygiene reasons. I told him I had warned everyone exactly what would happen and that he chose to ignore me. He shouted that he wanted a new jacket and that this one was ruined. Karen jumped in, saying I should have been more careful about where people put their coats. The whole situation escalated quickly. My nephew and his mother were both yelling at us while we were still trying to clean up the mess and take care of our sick dog. The rest of the family clearly didn't want to be in the middle of it, so they started packing up their food and leaving. My brother finally convinced his wife and son to leave, saying we'd sort it out later. But we didn't sort it out later. In fact, it got worse. For the past week, both my nephew and Karen have been texting me constantly demanding that we pay for a new jacket. They want £150 for a replacement. I kept telling them I had offered to pay for professional cleaning and that should be more than enough. Karen insisted that cleaning wasn't good enough and that the jacket was contaminated. They wanted a new one. I refused, saying her son caused this by doing exactly what I told him not to do. My husband is starting to waver. At first he was completely on my side, but now he's saying things like we should have anticipated this and moved the coats to another room. He thinks I'm being too stubborn and that we should just pay for the jacket to keep the peace. He told me we could afford it, that my nephew was just a teenager, and that this wasn't the hill we should die on. I asked him if we were really going to reward my nephew for completely ignoring us and making our dog sick. But I started wondering if maybe I was being unreasonable. If our dog had chewed up the jacket, I would have replaced it without question. Was this really any different? Then yesterday, I got a text that changed everything. My nephew had apparently been bragging to his friends about the whole situation, and one of his friends told my other nephew, who told me. According to the friend, my nephew had said he knew exactly what would happen, but he wanted to see if they were bluffing about the dog getting sick. He had deliberately fed our rescue dog knowing it would make him ill, just to test us. When I confronted him about this, he didn't deny it. Instead, he doubled down, saying he didn't think I'd actually make such a big deal about it, and that it was just a stupid jacket. He admitted he wanted to see what would happen, and didn't think it would be that bad. That was it for me. I screenshotted his texts, admitting he did it deliberately, and sent them to Karen and my brother. I also sent them to my husband, who finally realized what we were dealing with. Karen's response was to call me and scream about how I was trying to make her son look bad and that I was being vindictive. She said even if he did it on purpose, we should still pay for the jacket because it happened in our house. I told her that not only would we not be paying for the jacket, but they were no longer welcome in our home until they apologized to us and our dog. My brother backed me up, saying he was disgusted by his son's behavior and that he wouldn't be getting a new jacket from anyone. A few days later, my nephew posted on social media complaining about how unfair we were being. Several people who knew the story commented with the screenshots I'd shared, showing everyone exactly what he'd done. His friends started calling him out for deliberately making a dog sick, and apparently he's been getting a lot of grief about it at school. Karen tried to get him to delete the post, but the damage was done. Word got around their neighborhood, and now everyone knows what kind of person my nephew really is. My brother told me that Karen has been getting dirty looks at the grocery store and that several people have confronted her about raising a kid who would deliberately harm an animal. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.